friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. Just putting a front end on this video. You'll probably see another introduction here in just a moment. But the problem is that this video drove me completely bonkers to put together. It took me 4 or 5 days, maybe longer, to put this thing together. Every spare minute I had, I was working on it. I don't know, the video, the pictures are fine, but the audio just went to heck on this thing. 2 different cameras, and both of them had issues. One, the volume would go up and down. The other one got static and the volume issues. I tried to normalize the audio with the normalize feature, and that just screwed it up 10 times worse. I'm telling you, like it would go to 500, on one part and 100 in another part, and it just messed it up so bad. So now I'm going to have to go back through the whole cotton picking thing, and I'm going to have to manually set the volume on every single piece of audio, and there are hundreds in this video. So I'm just, I can't tell you how aggravating it is. It's just working way too hard. So the other reason I'm putting the front end on here is if you have personal experience. Now that means you've used it and you've done it and you know the camera and you know the sound system and etc., etc., etc. If you've got hands-on personal experience, I'd like for you, and you have a good recommendation, I would like for you to make that recommendation to me. Please send me an email, because I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to get different cameras and mics and everything. Please don't give me third-party recommendations. In other words, I subscribe to more than 300 YouTube creators. I do, and I'm not making that up. Like Wrangler Star, all the different machinists out there, like A-Bomb and AVE, and all of these guys. I subscribe to over 300. So I already know that they've got all this camera gear and all that stuff. The problem is they also have all the money because they're huge creators. I'm just a little old me, and I got to pay for this out of my pocket, Like Wrangler Star, he can afford anything he wants. He's got over 1 million subscribers, So if you've got personal hands-on experience and you know a good camera for the money and good audio for the money, microphone system, the whole bit that goes with the camera, make that recommendation, send me an email. I would appreciate it, because I've got to do something. I can't keep working this hard. This is killing me. I don't have time for this. So you're warned ahead of time that if you're wearing headphones, this might blow your ears out in places. I'm doing the best I can. Hope you enjoy the video. Thank you. Hello friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa Stringworks Workshop. Catching up on the Mandolin build. Today is September 23rd, which is Sunday, September 23rd. And here's where we are on the mandolin. I'll show it to you, and then we'll show you how we got it to this point. Okay, I made this neck today, believe it or not. Made pretty much the whole thing today. I did make one mistake. Can you spot it? Well, it's not exactly a mistake. I'm so used to not putting truss rods in them, I guess I just got in a hurry and forgot to cut the truss rod slot. It would have been much easier to cut it while it was still in raw square form. I can still put a truss rod in it. It's just going to be a little bit more work, but I'll get it done. So I did kind of make a mistake there, but not a big deal. Nothing that will affect the performance of the mandolin. Then we've got the top glued up to the sides. It's all ready to go. We'll show you how we did all that. And of course we got the back all carved. So in the next video, just to give you a preview, we'll be setting this neck in place and we'll get the back on it. So for sure we'll get that far. We'll get it put together. We'll also carve the rose in the back, which we've got to get done here before we put the back on, or at least I would prefer it that way. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. If you are new to my channel, then click that subscribe button, and then after you click the subscribe button, you'll see a bell icon. Click the bell icon and you'll be notified every time I put out a video. There's no charge for that. Some folks may not realize that. It's totally free. Just because you're subscribing doesn't mean you're committed to anything other than to see some videos, and that's what you'll get when you do that. Also, if you would please click that thumbs up button. It helps get these videos out in front of a few more people, and that always is helpful to me. There's a contest pending that will happen once we hit 20,000 subscribers. So help me hit that 20,000 subscriber mark by sharing these videos out on your social media and etc. I have to say, hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Thanks for watching. I have scribed this line on here, and that conforms to the top for the base bar. This is the base bar side. This is all I use to do that. You can see that the line curves and would match the shape of the top. We'll show you how I did that with the treble side. I get the treble bar lined up where it goes, and it's longer than it needs to be, so I split the difference and put about half on each end. This is an ink pen. You could do it with a pencil too, but I just find that ink cartridge works really good for this. And I have this little block, and you can see the block has a weird kind of a shape there, but it doesn't really make too much difference. I just put that on there just so that it gets somewhat conformed to the top shape. Then all I do is I let this thing, the block itself, kind of float. I put it right up against the wood, and then I just hold back here and just roll it, and it just rolls perfectly right up against the thing. You can see it makes a real nice line there, and we'll cut that out and glue it in place. Now we'll just cut those lines right here at the bandsaw. I try to do this very, very, very accurately because this will make it fit that top better, and it saves a lot of work. So I really do take my time on this. The closer you can get to that line, and I try to just barely leave the line, just so I know it's there. Got them cut out. I also cut them off to length so that they'll match the length of the marks that I have on here. And that one's the base one because it's thicker, and this one is the treble because it's thinner. Other thing about that is I put a I on the inside here, so that stands for inside, so we know that the I goes on the inside here, so they both face each other that way. So I don't make a dumb mistake, get them turned around somehow. Now what I do is I get very, very particular about how they fit. The first thing I do is I hold it up to the light, kind of like that, and look through it, and wherever I can see light through it, well, you know, I know that that spot's not touching, obviously. And I also do this rock test, and I can feel it rocking, and I can tell it's rocking right here, so that one spot's a little bit high. So what I'll do is take my little chisel, and we'll just knock off that little spot right there that's a little bit high. I like to get it fitting fairly close before I get down to the detail. That's better. It's not rocking too bad now. The other thing about this, because we're carving on a curve, I also will take more off on this outside edge to keep the brace sitting up perpendicular to the plane of the top. So when I do carve it, I'm going to be carving more off of this outside edge, just a little bit more, just so that the brace stays straight up and down. I'm going to hold it up to this bright light here and look under it and see where I see where it's touching and that kind of thing. Okay, it's touching pretty good on this end down here. So we'll knock off a little bit of that. It's getting pretty close, so I think I'll go to my carbon paper now. The carbon paper is almost not long enough in this particular case, this piece that I have. You have to be a little ginger with it because it'll tear and grab and rip. So I just do it like that. And then you can see automatically where your high spots are right there.
What do I do?
really don't see light through there now, so that's going to be close enough. I'll just lightly sand the area there just to make sure it's smooth. I don't normally sand the inside really much, but just barely touched it there with some sandpaper. I'm going to just knock the corners a little bit just because there's a little bit of fuzz on them. But it's just very little. Otherwise, it's pretty darn good. Off camera, I went ahead and fitted the treble bar too before I glue them on, because it's easier just to get them both fitted and then glue them both in place at the same time. I want good coverage on this, but I don't want excessive glue. Now, you have to remember which one's your treble and which one's your bass. Your bass bar is a little bit thicker, and it goes up on the top. You check for if it's tight everywhere. I like to even add more clamps. As you know, I'm a clamp freak. I like to put plenty of clamps on things like this. So we're going to add some more.
While I'm waiting for tomorrow, what do I do with all the pain?
Well, that's a real good clamp job. The braces fit perfectly, and that way, you got to remember that this is two things. It's structural, and it's very important to your sound. So you want to take the time to make sure that you do these braces correctly.
And now a word from our sponsor. This portion of the video is brought to you by Uncle Dave's Tire Service. For a hole in your tire or a whole new tire, call Uncle Dave, because he's guaranteed to pump you up. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the next time you're feeling flat or maybe just a little bit low, call Uncle Dave's Tire Service, because he's guaranteed to pump you up.
Testing the tone of this with my chromatic tuner here. In its present state, it shows a G sharp, about 20 cents flat of a G sharp. Now, I'm pretty good with that. As long as it's not a straight note. I don't want it to be a G sharp's okay. Because if it was a G, the G string would ring out too much. But this one sure is making a nice tone, I can tell you that. We've got the braces carved down to where I believe they're going to be fine. I haven't sanded them or anything like that. I've just carved them. And they feel real good. I don't like to have them real sharp on the top. I like to have them just slightly rounded over. And I think that's going to be good. Don't know how much that little camera can pick up, but it's got a real nice tone and a real nice sustain. It sounds just like a deep bell. Boom, boom. About that long. About that long. It's really nice. I think it's going to be great. Well, I was getting ready to cut out these F-holes, but then again I started thinking as I was drilling these holes that I'm getting ahead of myself. And I forgot to put in the gauze that I put in to reinforce the F-hole. And I want to put that in before I cut them out. It's a lot easier. Okay, so that gives me an idea where the gauze goes. And we're going to put that in right now.
I am aching like a river, swelling well outside.
It looks like a real mess right now, but most of that's going to be carved back away with my little finger plane. You just get it spread out around the hole, and then we can carve a lot of that away after it dries and clean it back up.
I am longing like the water.
Again, this is just a reinforcement because the grain goes in such weird directions around those F-holes that they can crack and split. This keeps it from happening. This was done on the Lloyd Lohr mandolins, so if it's good enough for those, it's good enough for mine. Kind of a mess, kind of a pain to put on, but once you get it halfway straightened out, it's not bad. A lot of people use cloth instead of the gauze, the cloth would probably be easier to apply, I will say that. But I like the gauze. I feel like it's a little lighter. I feel like it gives just as much strength, but maybe doesn't impair the vibration as much. That's just an opinion, and it's also because I have a lot of gauze. Oddly enough, it doesn't seem, even with that being on there wet, it seems like it didn't really hurt the tone much at all. Still rings out pretty good. I think it'll be better once it dries and gets hard, but it's pretty good.
Resting place. I could sing forever, but it still hurts inside, and I feel that I'm drowning in all the tears I've cried. I am making like a river, swelling while outside it speaks. I am longing like the water for a resting place.
Thought you might just like to hear the difference between the sound of the top and the back. Now, I'm first going to do this just on camera, just with the little tiny hole that's in the camera as a microphone. That's all you get, so but I think you'll still hear a difference. That long. So it's got a good sustain, a good clear note. Here's the back. Typically the backs don't make that much sound. This one rings pretty good. About like that long. So it's got a good ring to it too. So you can hear it and it sustains. That's what it sounds like just over the camera mic. Let's try it on a better quality mic and maybe you can hear a little difference that way.
Okay, here's what the top sounds like. Tapping and getting a couple of different places to let you hear it. That's the top. Now here's the back. There you go. So now you have some idea what the top and the back sound like.
Thought I'd give you the final weigh-in on the top. The top is completely finished. The braces have been carved way down. The final lining is put around the F-holes there to keep them from splitting. And everything's done that I think we're going to do to this top. So let's see what it finally weighs in at. Okay, it's on ounces first. And it's 4.6 ounces, 130 grams. 132, so probably 131 actually, because it's bouncing between the two. So we'll call it 131 grams. Let's check out the back. I think the back is finished, so let's put it on ounces first. Okay, it's 5.9 ounces, 166 grams. So there you go. That's what my top and back weigh, and that should give you some idea where you ought to be. You ought to be in that ballpark. I'm just trying to make sure I maximize my wood here. This is mahogany. It's already sized to the proper thickness, and now I'm going to trace out my patterns here for the blocks that go in the body. Alright, so I've got to cut out those 4 blocks. We're going to go cut those out on the bandsaw. We're ready to put the kerf lining on the one side of the mandolin here. What I'm going to do, this is pretty flexible lining, but I think I'll just go ahead and spritz it with a little water right here for this tight curve. Let that water soak in just a little bit there, I think it'll be less likely to break.
What do we do with all our sorrow?
This side passes by this block and then it just drops off. Well, I'm going to get my Dremel tool real quick and knock, so when I put the kerf on here, it'll be a smooth transition. You don't have to do that, but I just like that kind of thing. It just makes it nicer. I was going to use the Dremel tool to cut this out, and then I got to thinking as I was going for the Dremel tool that a chisel would be just as easy, and it's don't have to deal with the cords and the noise. And as a matter of fact, the chisel might even be the better tool for it in this particular case.
With all the loss we gain, I believe there come tomorrow we may blossom from the rain. I am aching like a river, swelling well outside its banks. I am longing like the water for a resting place. I am longing like the water.
Yep, right on the mark. Okay, we're going to call that good. Let's get the top glued on. Assuming the video footage turned out, you saw how I ran this through my thickness sander until I got it exactly the right thickness. We're ready to attach these top to it. Just going to inspect it to make sure the braces aren't hitting anything. Well, if I make any more of these clamps, I'm going to have to get another box. It's getting tight.
For a resting
Well, I can't explain it, but that was the hardest top I've ever tried to line up. I don't know why. It just did not want to cooperate. I did everything, as far as I know, the same as every other one. Apparently, I just wasn't holding my mouth right. I don't know what the problem was. But I do think I got it finally, and I do think it's fine. I think it's going to be perfect. I think what I learned there is I'm going to make sure that I make the tops just a hair bigger from now on, like a pencil width bigger all the way around than I made this one. Not a lot, just enough to make the difference for lining this up better. We're ready to start the glue up for the neck. I've got a good piece of curly maple here, as you can see. Now, it's got a little flaw right here, but that's going to be below the neck. The neck's going to be in this top section here and then come down like so. So this will be cut out. It won't even be a factor. So what I've done is I've squared this edge, surfaced this edge flat and this edge square to this. So now I can turn it back over this way. I've got this set at 3/4 of an inch. And we're going to cut a 3/4 inch piece off of this. This block is obviously big enough to make a solid neck. I don't make solid necks on my instruments. It's just my thing. If you want one of my instruments, I just don't make solid necks. Now, there's several reasons. One of them, I think the laminated deck is really pretty because I laminate dark, light woods. But also, it's a strength factor. And it's not just strength, but it's stabilization. You know, if you put a solid neck in an instrument, guitar especially, or anything like that, a solid neck is, over time, it's got a tendency to warp, twist, move with the atmosphere. When you laminate all these different grain patterns going different directions, it stabilizes the wood tremendously. That's exactly why they use plywood on the corners of houses for structural strength and you know, to keep it from the building from racking and twisting. It's just a very well known and very well documented way to strengthen something is to laminate it. That's what we do with my necks, but I like to make them decorative. So instead of just being totally structural, they're also decorative. So I always do this. Yes, I could make it much quicker the other way, but this is more work, but I like to do it. I've put an arrow pointing that way. It doesn't really mean anything other than when I sawed it, I was poking it that way through the saw. So I'll do the same thing to this other piece. That way I'll keep the orientation the same way. I've also marked this as this is going to be the top piece. This will be the inside. So that I'll glue it to the inside of this other one. That way the wood, the grain on both sides of the neck will look, similar. It won't look exactly the same, but it'll look similar. Okay, you can see now that the grain matches from side to side, and it just matches. Now I can turn this over. This is the top. The neck will be going this direction and come down like so, probably. I'll look at that and see if that's the way I want it. I might make it come this way and go down this way. That really just depends. It kind of depends on where I think the better look is for the main body of the neck. And that may be right in here. I'm not really sure. The way I do my standard neck is I put 2 laminations of dark and 1 lamination of the white in the middle of the dark. Now, I have done as many as 3 laminations of the dark and 2 laminations of the white. But I consider that my custom neck, and it's a lot more work, and it just takes more time and everything. So that's what I'm doing on this one, is the 2 laminations. I'm going to flatten this piece off because it's not perfectly flat before I saw it. For the resawing of this, because we're working with a very thin edge here, I've set my fence up tall, and that way I can hold this flat edge against the fence better. I have the blade set about, I'm going to guess 3/32 from the fence. That'll give me a very thin slice of wood. It'll be less than an 1/8 inch thick. An 1/8 inch, just for my millimeter friends, is 125 thousandths, which translates to, if you divide that by 40, what's that, 3 times it goes in there, so a little over 3 millimeters is what we're dealing with here. Actually, it probably about 3 millimeters, or maybe even slightly under, because I've set the fence less than 1/8 of an inch. So we're dealing with a 2 9/10 millimeters probably. Now we're about ready to try to resaw this. Now, granted, most people resaw with a much wider blade. This is only a 3/8 blade. It's fairly new. It seems to be cutting really straight. I'm hoping I don't get any walk on this where it would walk away from the fence or whatever. But we won't know till we try, so here we go. What I didn't realize when I cut that is that this part here is angled off. I think we can make that work. We'll just find a way where that doesn't get in the way. We'll make this piece, the headstock, come down this way, and I don't think that'll be a factor. I didn't really notice it though until I already sawed it, so that's what you got to pay attention to, and I didn't. Well, what's really stupid is I sawed it off the wrong side, but I think we can still salvage it, so here we go. Well, as you just saw, I sawed this off the wrong edge of the board, which was really dumb, but on the other hand, it doesn't hurt a thing. I've checked my pattern, it'll fit, and it'll fit fine. Now, actually, the benefit of that, which, I always try to find something that's good, is that I don't need these others this wide, and in fact, it'll just make the glue up that much tougher. So I'm going to go ahead and saw them all down to the width of this one now, including the main ones, and get rid of the excess wood. It'll just save on gluing and clamping. So that's roughly what it's going to look like after it's glued up. Now we're going to thin these dark ones and light ones down yet because they don't need to be that thick. Plus I want to get them perfectly smooth. And I just want them there for decoration. So when they're real thin, they just look nicer. They look more elegant, if you will, rather than the thick ones. I've got the machine set for sanding the inside edges of this glue up. Those are the edges that the laminations will touch, and I just want them fairly smooth so that we don't have any cracks showing on the edges of the lamination. Orient this correctly. This bad edge will go down because, or I'm sorry, it will go up because the neck goes down here, and therefore it will be sawed off. These two pieces here are pretty much flawless, but what little flaws they have I'll put down so that they won't be in the top part of the neck. Like there's a little flaw there, that'll be sawed out, it won't show. And there you go, that's what it's going to look like all glued up. There's one more factor in this glue up that I keep forgetting to mention, and that is that also laminating this allows me to put in a piece of wood from trees that I have personally cut down myself. This is cherry, this dark wood is cherry, and it was a cherry tree that where I built my first workshop was in the way. So I cut that tree down, and I've used it in hundreds of projects since. That was many years ago, 30 some years ago, when I cut that tree down, and I'm still using pieces of it. I made a drop leaf table out of it for the house, and I've used it in, well, a lot of instruments now. I can't, some instruments I put walnut for the dark instead of cherry, but in this particular case I'm using the cherry. I hope Larry out there in West Virginia will appreciate that little story, that this part of the tree came from a tree that I sawed down when I built my very first workshop. We got the vise opened up here. The top, or what will be the top of the neck, is on the downside there. I'm just pushing these to make sure that they're all down as far as they can go, and that way it'll kind of get the top closer to level. Glue's starting to squeeze out. We don't get a lot of squeeze out there because I only put the glue on one side in this case, but it's starting to squeeze out, which will give you a good indication that you're getting good coverage. Even these big clamps, if you push down on them real hard, you'll either bend them or spring them or tear them up. So you're sometimes better off just putting a good amount of pressure on there and getting some more smaller clamps and putting on to give it additional clamping force. And that's what we're going to do here. This piece that's left over, I refer to it as my designer doorstop. The first Patreon supporter who emails me and says they would like to have this designer doorstop will win it. So there you go. The way all this works out is I take this piece, which was underneath the neck there, and I cut wings out of this and glue them on the peg head to make the peg head wider. But it also leaves me with a second designer doorstop. Here's the first one, here's the second one. So the first subscriber, Patreon or not, the first just regular subscriber that emails me and wants this one, they will win that one. So this one's for the Patreon subscriber, this one's for the regular subscriber. I'll clean them both up and make them a little bit nicer so that they're smooth and everything. So they are good doorstops. So we're going to cut our wings right now for the peg head. And I guess I would refer to this as just a piece of scrap designer plywood. I don't know what to do with that. That's the only piece I haven't figured out. Otherwise there's very little waste. There's the two wings that we'll be able to glue on here now. So we're going to get that done. It's fairly simple how I do this. I just get glue on the surface here. I'm running out of my wonderful Type Bond original. I'm going to have to go get some of that yet this evening, as a matter of fact. It's very easy clamping this way. It's also easy to keep it level this way because the vise bars here keep it level and flat. And then crank her down and she's ready to go. Now we'll just let that set up and we'll be ready to put the veneer on there and then cut the peg head out. Well, of all of the things I do on building any instrument, that's the scariest cut to me, because you're trying to not get into these lines, you're trying not to cut this line here, you know, you're just trying to taper off and get rid of a bunch of wood. You could do it other ways, but that's the fastest way, but it's also the most destructive way if you screw up. It's not terribly dangerous if you're paying attention, but it's really destructive, or it can be. I think I got away with it. I think we're fine. You know, I cut a lot more off this side than I did this side, but that can be fixed with a file and a rasp, and that's okay. At least I got the basic angle back here about right, and that's what I was really going for. Now that we got the neck real roughed out, we're going to start fine-tuning it with our... This is a very coarse rasp that we're going to start with. The trick to doing this, and I think doing it well and fast, is to watch this edge, this bottom edge, and you don't touch that edge. You don't touch it until the very end, you know. So you want to leave that there, so that's your reference point. Anyway, you just don't want to cut into that because you could start making a mess out of your neck. That keeps you good and straight and everything right there. A lot of folks make this come to a very sharp point. I don't see much point in that, other than, you know, when you slide your hand down there, your hand hits it. So why do you want to make it rough on your hand? I typically make mine a little bit more round. Okay, that's the rough rasp, and you know, I didn't stop the camera. It's all been one take, more or less, and we pretty much went from a square block of wood to a fairly decently shaped neck already. And it happens pretty darn fast. This is one of the easiest parts of building the mandolin, in my opinion. Okay, I'm going to have a double cut, smoother rasp here now that we're going to clean it up with, and this will smooth it off a lot. It's still not the final, but and this will let me get a little closer to my line down here too. It's good to keep this big square peg head because you can hold that in your vise and it's square, and that really makes it a good solid hold. Okay, that's good enough maybe for the moment. Now I'm going to work on just these angles, flattening them off a little bit. Might have to go to the sander on these. Well, we got her in pretty good shape for doing it, you know, quick and dirty there. A little bit of roughness right here yet that we can get out, and a little roughness in here, but that's okay. I think we can work that out, no problem. Now that I've got it this far along on the shape, I think I'm going to go ahead and flatten this out in my sander and get it to the right thickness and then put the veneer on it. Well, I was going to smooth off the back of this and get it the right thickness before putting this on here. But I thought, oh, I'll just do it all. I'll put this on here first and then do that because it just makes more sense, really. Got this all marked where I want it to go so that the nut will butt up to it pretty square there. So I'll go ahead and get the glue on this surface. This edge and this edge are square, and I can square that up to this and square it up to this, and it looks real good. Now I'm going to put it in this vise down here. Got the vise cranked down pretty tight. I'm checking the veneer here. It looks like it's lined up perfectly. I'll have to get some additional clamps and blocking and clamp this up right here. But otherwise, it looks real good. I'm going to drill a hole through here before I cut this out. Now we should be able to finish sawing it out.